We are in the fourth week of the Easter season. I hope that each of you have been able to notice signs of new life springing up all around you during this season. Our resurrection text this week again focuses before Jesus's crucifixion and resurrection. Gaffney has led us to the 7th chapter of the book of Luke. Fun fact, during the season of Epiphany, we contemplated the verses just before today's passage. That was on the 7th week of Epiphany, and the verses just after today's passage. That was the 8th week of Epiphany. So today's story may seem familiar to you. When I was prepping it for today, I thought, hey, didn't we already do this passage? We haven't. We've done the two on either side. In the passage just before today's text, we walked with Jesus and his companions the 30 miles, mostly uphill, from Capernaum to Nain. When we finally arrived at the city gates, we were stopped by a funeral procession. A widow's only son had died. Rather than become frustrated by the delay, Jesus saw this woman, had compassion for her, raised her son to life, and gave her son back to her. Everyone was amazed by what Jesus had done. Luke 7:16-17 says, they were all filled with awe and praised God. A great prophet has appeared among us, they said. God has come to help God's people. This news about Jesus spread throughout Judea and the surrounding country. Jesus's actions excited and puzzled people as they tried to make sense of who Jesus was. Was he just a great and powerful prophet, or was he something more? In our text today, John the Baptizer is trying to make sense of who Jesus is. He asks, are you the one who is to come, or are we to wait for another? So as you ponder this text today, you may want to ask yourself, how am I trying to make sense of who Jesus is? One final thing that I want to say before we get into the passage is that this text was a difficult one for me to prep. I struggled to come up with guiding questions that feel okay to me. You see, this text is often used as a clobber passage towards people who live with conditions that society labels as disabilities. The proof that Jesus is the one who is to come is that blind people see, deaf people hear, paralyzed people walk again, etc. You'd be surprised at how often well-meaning Christians offer to pray over my deaf sons for the miracle of hearing. My snarky response when I'm in a snarky mood is to offer to pray over them for the miracle of American Sign Language. My sons are not disabled because they cannot hear. They are disabled because they communicate in a language that most people do not know. This passage is often used to support the idea that in the new creation, there will be no disabled people. There will be no disabled bodies. I consider this view harmful and inaccurate. After all, when Jesus appears to his followers after his resurrection, his body still carries the scars of crucifixion. I imagine him walking with a limp and having difficulty using his hands. And yet he was fully embraced by his community. I think there is much that Jesus's disability can teach us about shalom if we only have the eyes to see. So we don't have time here to have a full conversation or sermon or hours and hours of lectures about disability theology or disability justice in the church. But I did want to highlight this so that you can ponder it as we go through this passage today. I think that if you don't live with a disability yourself or have people in your community who are labeled disabled, we can miss that interpretations of scriptures like this one can really bring harm instead of shalom to the community. So that is all I will say by way of introduction. Before I read the passage, I will light my candle as a symbol of God's presence with us here today. And may we be open to the graces of gladness and joy because of the great glory of the resurrection of Jesus. Luke 7:18-23. Now the disciples of John brought news of all these things to John. And John called two in particular among his disciples. He sent them to the Messiah to ask, "Are you the one who is to come, or are we to wait for another?" When the disciples had come to Jesus, they said, "John the Baptizer has sent us to you to ask, are you the one who is to come, or are we to wait for another?" At that time, Jesus cured many people of diseases, plagues, and evil spirits. And to many blind persons, he gave sight. So Jesus answered them, "Go and take this news to John, what you have seen and heard. Those who were blind receive sight. Those who were lame walk. Those who were diseased in the skin are cleansed. Those who were deaf hear. Those who were dead are raised. Those who are poor have good news proclaimed to them. And blessed is anyone who takes no offense at me." This is the word of the Lord. Before I guide you through the passage with some questions and pauses, let us take a couple of centering breaths. Breathing in God's Spirit and breathing out anything that distracts you from being in the presence of God. May we be open to the graces of gladness and joy because of the great glory of the resurrection of Jesus. I invite you to enter the story. Now, the disciples of John brought news of all these things that had happened in Nain to John. How did John's disciples learn about the incident at Nain? Were some of them there to witness Jesus resurrect a dead man? If so, imagine their long journey to where John is locked inside Herod's prison. When they arrive to John after their journey, what condition do they find John in? What is his mood? We don't know how long he's been in prison, but imagine how he felt. The fears and worries going through his mind. How does John respond to this news that his disciples bring him? And John called two in particular among his disciples. He sent them to Jesus to ask, "Are you the one who is to come, or are we to wait for another?" How do these two disciples respond to being chosen and sent by John? How did the disciples who were not chosen respond? What motivates John to send them to Jesus? Who does John think Jesus is? What does he remember about baptizing Jesus and what happened those several years before at the Jordan River? What might John be feeling as he watches the two disciples leave? How long is their journey to Jesus? We don't know. What do they talk about on the way? Where do they find Jesus? What is he doing when they approach? And who is with him? When the disciples had come to Jesus, they said, "John the Baptizer has sent us to you to ask, are you the one who is to come? Or are we to wait for another?" How does Jesus respond to their question? Does he say anything? Does anyone else say anything? How long does he pause before turning to the crowd of people? And at that time, Jesus cured many people of diseases, plagues, and evil spirits. And to many blind persons, he gave sight. As you watch Jesus move through the crowd and heal these people, what are you thinking? Who does Jesus choose to heal? Who does Jesus choose to not physically heal? How do they respond? What happens to the people after they've encountered Jesus? The people for whom he's given sight to, and the people that he's been given insight to. What happens to their communities? How long does Jesus spend healing people, talking with people? To show the answer to their question. Before he speaks. So Jesus answered, "Go and take this news to John, what you have seen and heard. Those who were blind receive sight. Those who were lame walk. Those who were diseased in the skin are cleansed. Those who were deaf hear. Those who were dead are raised. Those who are poor have good news proclaimed to them. And blessed is anyone who takes no offense at me." As the two disciples turn to leave, to return to John with this message, what are you feeling about what you just witnessed? I invite you to spend the next 10 minutes in a colloquy with the divine. Speak to God about what you experienced during the contemplation, especially the parts of the story that caused you to experience strong emotions, gave you great joy or left you feeling uneasy. What might God want to say to you about your life as it relates to this story? When I sound my chimes, it will indicate that you have about a minute to wrap up your colloquy, after which time I will end the silence with this week's psalm. If you're doing this contemplation later with the recording, go ahead and hit pause now so that you can spend as much time as you feel you need in silent contemplation. Then restart the video when you're ready to hear the reading. I will close our time of silence with Psalm 9, 9 to 14. God, who is faithful, is a stronghold for the oppressed, a stronghold in times of trouble. They trust you, they who know your name, for you do not forsake those who seek you, redeeming God. Sing praises to the Holy One enthroned in Zion. Declare God's deeds among the peoples. Be gracious to me, gracious one. See what I suffer from those who hate me. You lift me up from the gates of death, so that I may recount all your praises. And in the gates of daughter Zion, rejoice in your salvation. And also, I'd like to read Derek's chat. Derek came to Jesus and asked, "Are you the one who is to come, or are we to wait for another?" And Jesus answered him, "Pay close attention to the things that you are observing. Those who failed to perceive God in their midst are having their hearts opened. Those who have been rushed by society are able to slow down. Those who have been excluded are finding their place again. Those whom society has disabled are experiencing their barriers removed. New life is emerging, and the good news is turning the world's way of things upside down. And blessed is anyone who takes no offense at me." Amen.